LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat 5 segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to Drummers on Drumming, a podcast powered by Big Fat Snare Drum. My name is Ben Hilsinger, and we are back with another installment of the Drum Panel. And I actually introduced my guests during this show, so I don't have to do an intro. I'm just going to say bye. Bye. All right, so I'm bad at making sure that people know exactly who is talking. So Eric, can you say hi? And then after that, Matt, can you say hi and maybe introduce yourself a little bit? Because people do know Eric. But so this voice is Ben Hilsinger. And Eric, go ahead.
Well, people know me. Hi, I'm Eric.
They definitely do. I don't know if they know you in the biblical sense, but...
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah.
My name is Matt Starr. For clarity, there's a couple of different people named Matt Starr, so I like to just say that, if you're looking for me on socials and stuff, I'm the one that goes by the real Matt Starr, and yeah, there you go.
Well, I think you're my favorite Matt Starr, and I will die on that hill, so I'll say that. Well, since you're a new guest, we do a few questions that we ask a lot of new guests. So if you could be a fly on the wall for any record, what would that be?
You know what? I'll just say the first thing that came into my head when you asked that, it would be All Things Must Pass, the George Harrison record from 1970 or whatever, where there was, multiple amazing drummers that we all loved, like Keltner and Jim Gordon and Alan White and Ringo. And yeah, so that's probably just because I have a picture in my head of what that may have looked like, and I would love to just know what it was like to see that many incredible, iconic musicians in one room together making music.
I love that. And have you guys seen that new documentary on Paul McCartney, Man on the Run?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Eric, if you don't know, it's basically about the time, the Beatles broke up, 69, 70, and it's just about kind of Paul McCartney's journey of putting out McCartney and then Ram and just kind of finding out who he was as a musician outside of the Beatles.
Sure.
And while he was trying to figure himself out and then create Wings, ultimately, John puts out Imagine, and he has How Do You Sleep? Is that on Imagine? Which is like one of the first diss tracks,
Yeah.
And then of course George puts out All Things Must Pass, and so they're kind of like highlighting how some people regard the best Beatles songs as McCartney, and then as he's trying to figure himself out, just his other bandmates are putting out these amazing records, and how he, and then also Ringo. I think Ringo was the first one to have a number one hit post Beatles, ironically. But anyways, yeah, that'd be a great record, not only for what you mentioned, but also just, I'm sure John rolled through the studio, because it was kind of the three of them versus Paul and management at that time. So it'd be fun just to see like what they'd be talking about in that heat of the moment,
Oh yeah, there must be some spicy conversations going on at that point. And yeah, and I just always think about how like George had like this backlog of incredible songs too, because he was, he had been limited to like 2 songs per record, right? And then all of a sudden, that's why it's a triple album, which is insane. And it's all strong stuff too. It's not like it's a bunch of filler or something, I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, anyway.
What piece of gear have you had in your possession the longest?
Oof, my Gretsch kit.
Really?
Yeah, which I pieced together a bunch of used vintage Gretsch drums back when people weren't really doing that. This was like late 90s, you know, and I'm from Toronto. I was still living in Toronto, and even in Toronto and the surrounding area at that time, you could go on classified listings and various other sources and called around to stores, and I found just a bunch of drums, and I put them all together. And originally I had a guy in Toronto refinish them for me, and later on I had the kit refinished again by Chris Hewer out here. But I still use that kit, and that kit was on tour with me last year. Like it had never been on tour before, and it finally went on tour with me. So I have a huge connection with that kit, and yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like the only thing I still have from that many years ago. So
What made you not use it so long and then finally use it?
Well, I mean, I was a DW artist for over 10 years, and I was using DW drums a lot on the road always on the road. And that kit, the Gretsch kit, was always there, kind of, like a lot of people, I guess. Like, I used it for recording and...
Oh, of course.
Right.
Put the cameras down. All right, let's do a take. Yep.
Yeah. And then I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I really want to play this kit on tour. So I made that decision, and that's where I'm at with it.
What color is it again? I'm drawing a blank.
It's now piano black. Like, it's just a traditional, like,
classy.
Yeah. Chris does an amazing job with that. So it looks great.
I know this might be too insider baseball, but I missed getting some of my edges redone by Chris by like maybe 2 months. And so now luckily I go to Bill Dedamore, but
Bill is amazing.
Yeah.
Bill is he really is. Like, he actually did, I changed a bass drum size with the Gretsch kit. Actually, I added a 16 by 22, and I took it to Bill, and he did piano black for me and did the edges on it, and it's just ridiculous. It's great. So yeah, totally. Bill is incredible.
For people who don't know, Bill is the owner, founder, the main guy behind Pork Pie Drums, and he's based in LA. And so a lot of people, if you're an LA drummer listening to this and you ever want edges or rewraps or finishes, he also helps do the high-end Rogers stuff. He helps them do that and cuts their edges. So hit him up or hit me up and I'll intro you. But he's a great source in the Southern California area to make a drum sound great. Also Pro Drum, they do something similar. But let's just start with this. So the other day I was in a text thread with a bunch of LA drummers because someone submitted a video of me playing with Eve 6 doing like a trash can ending, and then we kind of just all started talking about what we do. And before I say what I do, like, do you guys have a general... Eric, I'll go with you first since I always ignore you for the first 20 minutes. What? Actually, no, I will go with Matt. No, I'm kidding. Do you have a general... direction you go with a trash can ending or something that people know you for?
Oh geez, I don't think that anyone knows me for a trash can ending.
Eric, you're the trash can guy.
Oh, you do that one thing. I like your trash can endings.
Yeah.
I don't actually. Yeah, I would say I do kind of do a general thing every time. This sort of like bludged thing off of the cymbals that kind of gets just like a really ugly, just lots of noise and really abrasive and aggressive. The one thing I will say is I don't like to add a stinger at the end. I don't like a final note. I like to let it ring out and just kind of fizzle away. And sometimes I get weird looks for that, but whatever.
You're saying even in the middle of the set, you'll just let things hang, or you're talking specifically like the end of the set?
Actually, what's funny is I have had a few situations where like they'll do a trash can ending on the last song and then another one at the end of the encore. So I will for sure let the one before the encore hang, and then maybe I'll add a stinger at the end of the set. But then the real question is, then do you do the last note, the duh, and then do you go do you stinger the stinger?
I feel like it's like in The Office when I think it's Andy isn't allowed to finish his melody, and he's like, "Now I have a headache."
Oh, yeah.
Weirdly enough, I feel like I would almost like have a hard time sleeping that night if I don't get that last little.
Yeah, you got to have the last word.
Yeah,
the last
exactly.
word.
Yeah. It's really just a self-importance exercise. What about you, Matt?
Well, it's funny because when you guys are saying all this, I'm thinking like every time I do what you would call the trash can ending, I'm always thinking like, no matter who I'm playing with, my brain goes to like, these guys are just waiting for me to finish this. Like they're looking at me like, okay, like They're like standing there with their guitar, like, do your thing, okay. And then I think on the gigs that I'm doing currently, like there's almost always a stinger at the end of all of that, except the very last song of the set just doesn't have that kind of an ending anyway. It has like an ending where everybody's just supposed to let it ring out. And there's a little loop that keeps playing and a bunch of atmospheric stuff that keeps happening. So we're just like let it go and then kind of walk off stage. But yeah, like for everything else, there's a stinger, or even like just like one song where, like when I'm playing with Sarah McLaughlin, that she actually comes up and does, like, we kind of have this like, who's gonna do the stinger, who's gonna lead it, like it kind of gets traded off. So I guess there's enough variety that I don't feel like I'm doing the same old stuff every time. I'm trying not to do that anyway. So
when you guys do a stinger, let's get in the weeds here. What is your like sticking?
The lead up to the stinger, or because I'm thinking of the stinger as just being like the final.
Yeah, I guess I'm just using Eric's words because I don't have one for it. But like the thing, like the ga ga ga, this thing, boom.
Oh, that thing. Okay. Yeah,
so mine, while you guys answer, mine usually involves the snare because I like to just add a rim shot. It's just kick, floor, snare, and it's like bop. I guess it's like a 16th note triplet. Da bop, and then the snares on the downbeat. Yeah, I do 4 at the end.
I would say I'm either doing like a 4-note thing where it's 3 on the floor tom and 1 on the bass drum, or just 2. So it's either digga or blah. Either one of those. Yeah.
What about you, Eric?
I do kick, right, left, kick on the floor tom.
Okay.
That's cool.
It's for good. Like we all gave different answers, which is like I thought that was like the way to do it, but it's not.
Yeah.
All right, so Eric, you and me talked about this at the end of the Gunner episode when he had to leave, and then I felt like we didn't really get into it as much as I wanted to, and so let's talk about it now. And Matt, I know you're also an educator, a great educator, and so we were talking about the current state of just the state of education today and the arts. And so when it comes to band class, what do you think is good about the way you guys were brought up in band, whether it's concert band, pep band, jazz band, marching band, whatever? And then what do you think could be updated for society these days and how music is going and all that jazz? Because obviously not a lot of people listen to jazz, not a lot of people listen to classical music and John Philip Sousa stuff, which is the things that we learned in school. So we'll start with the positive. What did you guys love about band class in elementary school, middle school, high school, all that? I'm such a bad questioner. I think of like, I need to write my questions down. Literally before I started, I just put down drum education question. I probably should have thought of it.
It's a great subject matter though.
I get good answers, but my questions are just like, oh, God, Ben. Okay, Miss Stroke McGillicuddy. All right, Eric, go first.
Do you know what he's talking about, Matt? I have no idea. Can you repeat the question?
I'm not sure.
I guess the number's 6. Moving on.
No, for me it was I really valued the discipline that I took from it. For sure, the camaraderie, like the group atmosphere, was really valuable. Whether that was the camaraderie aspect or even the slightly competitive aspect, friendly competition at least.
Did you have like the chairs growing up, like first chair, second chair, blah blah blah?
We did certainly in other instruments. It was kind of more of a free for all in percussion land, but it definitely existed. Yeah, but no, I mean even without that, you could kind of sense what the pecking order was, and in high school there was like 3 different bands, and you had to audition to get into the top one. So
you're from a big school?
Yeah, it was a pretty big school, pretty big program. So I was very lucky in that regard. And then, just the exposure to the wide variety of percussion instruments was really valuable. It was really instrumental in getting me well-rounded and exposed to a lot of different things. And even though it's not necessarily what I do anymore, that was like super pivotal for me.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate because I got to the high school that I went to at a time when the band and string directors had both been there for almost 30 years, and they were at the tail end of their careers, and they had figured out how to get the most out of every group of students as it changed over every year. It really gotten this thing down to like a science. And at that time, it was probably it was the most notable post-secondary high school music program in Canada. I'm from Toronto originally. It was not an art school. It was not like a private school or anything. It just happened to have two guys that were super enthusiastic about running a great program. And so I wouldn't change a thing about my experience, including, some of the moments when I was super uncomfortable, like being in the big band and not being a reader at that time. I figured out that I needed to learn how to read by being in that setting. And the teacher he did not mince words about that with me, and really took me to task, and also styles, like certain styles that I didn't know anything about at that time. And so that was the big band part of it. But yeah, being in percussion sections, and also I was a string player for the first I played violin until I graduated high school, so I was kind of pulling double duty and jumping back and forth between the orchestras and the bands, and I just got like totally immersed. And it was amazing because it was like the yearly, end of year shows. I was like running around ragged trying to make it to all these things, all these rehearsals, and I was in most of the numbers in the final show. And it was a really great kind of like little bit of a preview of like how our lives can be when we're at our busiest, where you're just kind of like overwhelmed with stuff, but it's all great stuff. And how to like kind of navigate that whole thing. And I just think, those kind of programs are so valuable for people, especially people who are going to go on into music as a career, but probably for everybody, like just to be a part of something like Eric said, like a team kind of thing where you really feel connected to the people that you're with. And that's a huge part of being a musician in the real world, is learning how to be a part of a team. So yeah, it's absolutely invaluable for me.
Yeah, and so I had a kind of an opposite, I guess, situation of Eric and you, because we had, my graduating class was 90 people, and I grew up in a town of like 1,200 people, and we didn't have a budget. Our jazz drum set was this massive Tama kit, like we had no idea what we were doing, and because I had zero there was other drummers, but I was the only one that was really kind of like, I really give a shit about this in a career way that I didn't. From a young age, I was kind of known as the drummer. And so I didn't really have any competition. In some ways, maybe I'd be a better drummer if I did, but I also think that it gave me the confidence pretty young to be the guy that would play in front of the school at football games on Friday nights, and blah, blah, blah. So it was nice that it was so small. But it's funny, in middle school, I actually stopped. Not that I was the most amazing drummer, but at that point I was past like playing eighth notes on the marching snare. And so I was like a year ahead of some of the other, like the rest of the class. And so I asked the teacher, I don't even know why this is, but I wanted to do trombone just to challenge myself. And so during music class, he allowed me to go to this room down the hall and just by myself start from scratch on the trombone. And it lasted about 3 weeks, and I was like, this is stupid, and I went back to drums. But he let me do it. It's just like, so Mr. Meredith, Mr. Jim Meredith, that's how much of a Wild West it was out there. He's like, I don't know. It was probably also because I was really, really disruptive in the class. And he's like, get the hell out of my classroom. Sure, you sit in front of a trombone. I don't care.
Take this trombone.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If I could jump in really quick, I think what's really cool about band programs in general is I think it's kids' first experience with like true self-directed learning. It's not any band director or any music teacher's job to really teach you how to play your instrument. It's to teach you how to learn to play your instrument. Like, sure, you go home and you do your math problems, but like, I'm not internalizing how to do trigonometry. It doesn't resonate with me. But like going home and practicing drums, it was like, I'm learning, on my own. And then you bring that to class, and that's how it gets put together. So yeah, it's interesting to see that with the trombone, like so directly for you, Ben.
Oh my God. I wish, I don't even remember how bad it was. It was bad. Trombone's a hard instrument. If you guys don't know,
could you get like the basic like sound out of it, or?
I think I got past the table of contents. You know what I mean? Like, I think but I guess we kind of talked about it, Eric, where So the genres that you learn in band class, I guess the only way to include saxophone and certain instruments is to play the music that you play in band class, like classical stuff. And so, because we were kind of discussing what's a way to make it not be cut from the budget. What could they do differently? And I guess I'm coming from the perspective of a school that was very traditional and had no budget, so we didn't have these extracurricular things that we could do. I'm just curious how you can update it a little bit, because it'd be hard for a kid these days. I mean, even just talking about TikTok and stuff, there's so much more stimulation than learning an instrument. How do you help kids put that thing away and actually just not be bored, or allow yourself to be bored enough to learn an instrument?
I'm gonna respectfully push back a little bit on some of your sentiments. I feel like kids do want to learn an instrument. I don't think that like the phone is taking away music from kids. I think that there's still an energy and an excitement about learning an instrument. I always point to the massive success of School of Rock programs. Like there's like 10 in the Chicagoland area, and I'm sure there's equally as much, if not more, around LA.
Yeah, there's a ton of them. Yeah.
And I mean, there's spin-off programs. So I think kids are rabid to learn instruments, and they're excited about music. And to me, what frustrates me is I feel like there's not a mainstream outlet for those kids within mainstream school academia. I think back to like my first time playing church gigs later in life and playing with some of the best musicians I've ever played with, but they know effectively the Nashville number system over traditional music notation. It's like, how can these unbelievably talented and with extensive music theory knowledge musicians not have a place in mainstream academia? Like they could not audition into a music college and get in. To me, I don't know what the answer is directly, but I just feel like something needs to be updated in the way that we learn and the way that we talk about music, and even the way that we talk about music theory. One could certainly make the argument that classical Western notation isn't the future anymore. We could pivot to a Nashville number system across the board and see what happens. Talk about things in terms of intervals, and rather than the direct staff notes on a page.
I feel like kids who really want to be good at an instrument and want to get into it are gonna find a way and probably put the phone down to do that. Like I think, or maybe they'll, somehow leverage what they can find on the phone as part of their education. I absolutely agree with like the concept of there being like lots of distractions, and that probably makes it harder, but I still think that the kids that really want that are gonna figure it out. I'm just thinking about myself. If it was me now in that position, I'm sure that I'd be distracted, but I'd also be obsessed with music and the drums, and I'd still want to be dealing with that. The idea of ear training for anybody on any instrument to me is like the top thing, and especially for drummers, because like I just remember when I got to college, like I went to college for a couple of years in Toronto, and I was in a jazz degree program, which I eventually left because it was a bummer, which I could get into another time if you want. But one of the things that was really, that I'm glad I did as a part of that, was a ton of ear training and just understanding the basics of like harmony and melody and intervals. And it was like very much like I was drowning in it at the time. Even though I had experience on a melodic instrument, it was still a whole other world with that kind of sophisticated harmony. But looking back on it, if I hadn't done that, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure my ears would have, grown still anyway, but they really grew a lot in those couple of years. And I think that the earlier that drummers especially, but pretty much I think in maybe any instrument, can get some basic piano skills, I think that is like still something that it's like considered to be an old-fashioned way of thinking about it, but I still think that that's like extremely valuable for people to understand how all of that stuff works. And the keyboard, they always say it lays it out for you, right? It's like a really visual thing, and you can see where things are going. And I think that's super important. And looking back on it, if I could have started on piano, I would love to have done that as well, because the earlier the better.
Same.
Right? Another thing that I mean is another kind of old school way of doing things. But I mean, even in the high school I went to, there was a ton of like fundraising that went on to keep the program. Because all the afters, like you said this earlier, Ben, like all the after school stuff was like voluntary. Like the teachers would go and spend extra hours. The students were asked and welcome to join, and of course wanted to be there. So everybody was there. And then there were, extra concerts and extra, performances just to raise money for the program to like repair or buy additional instruments and just keep like the whole thing flowing. And because I think even back then, I mean, there was not enough money, in a public high school education. I'm sure in private schools it's a different thing, but sometimes it's unfortunately like it's sort of incumbent on the parents and students to figure out ways to keep it alive if they really want to. As much as I feel like it shouldn't be that way, it's part of it, I think, and maybe that's still how they have to do it. I don't know. I'm kind of out of touch with how high school music programs work now, but that seems to me like an important thing,
I do find the irony of the phone argument is like, that's a thing in the first place because the human brain just like craves knowledge. So the phone is just like spewing knowledge at you 24/7. And sometimes it's a bad thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's useless knowledge. But I mean, you see like how many young drummers are just like throwing down on Instagram or, any social media app. Yeah. And you're just like, oh yeah, that's what having access to something like Drumeo or, all of these other drummers on YouTube and Instagram does for a young brain that's on their phone all the time. They're just like consuming. It can be a weapon for good in like a weird way,
I wish I could have my previous, like my younger self on the podcast and interview him. I'm curious what my answer of what makes a good drummer would have been back then and what my like North Star, because I don't remember what my North Star was. I grew up listening to my dad's music, and then Travis, became a big thing for me. But for the most part, I didn't have those like immediate comparisons to what other drummers are doing, like my contemporaries. And I'm curious if that would have made me give up before, because nowadays I'm like, well, I'm a drummer, I know how to hold my own. So like when I see those things, I don't immediately go like, well, fuck this, I'm not going to be able to be as good as them. But back then, I'm curious with how fragile I am in person, how I would have been like, yeah, I'm just going to stick with trombone.
I agree that the amount of information that's available is incredible, and I think that is huge. And I also think that one thing that, can't be found anywhere online is it kind of ties back into what we were saying, which is like, and what Eric said, which is like the community aspect of all of this, and not just the social interaction part of it, but also just the idea of like that music is to be made with, more than one person, right? Like, of course, we can make music on the drums solo, and there's guys that we know that do that, and it's brilliant. But I think for the most part, the majority of us are involved in situations where we're making music with at least one other person. And to me, that's like, you cannot get that any other way except by actually just doing it, right? And I think that like the thing about high school and even college music programs is that it at least puts you into that scenario, whether you want to be or not. It's like you're in ensembles and you're required to be in certain things. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like for me, when I have students who I see are doing really well and taking to a lot of challenging material and figuring a lot of stuff out, the thing I keep saying to them is like, okay, this is all great. I really want you to try to like get into a situation where you're playing music with people. It could be a band, it could be, whatever situation in high school that you can find. But to me, there's nothing more valuable than that. Because once you've learned all this stuff, it's like, well, how do I actually apply all of it? I mean, applying technique and applying coordination and all of that, knowing like what do I actually need from all of this stuff, and what am I going to be using all the time? And that's probably been not a problem, but that's probably been a challenge for a really long time, is like getting people involved in situations where they can actually learn to do it with other people. Because that's still, if you're going to play music, that's still the most important thing, I think.
I 100% agree. I think a thing that is really good for people to learn too is constructive criticism, or the disagreement of ideas. And I think being able to take that with integrity and humility is so important to being in a band. Because I used to get so, if someone didn't like an idea I had, I would just go down a rabbit hole of self-shame. Well, that means they hate me, and then blah, blah, blah. You know, big thing to learn.
Yeah, the ego thing is a big part of it too, right? Like learning to let go of your attachment to your own ideas and all of those kinds of things. Yeah, 100%. And that, I think that all comes from spending time with other people, and whether it's a band director or just, you know, the artist you're playing with or whoever, producer or whatever, stuff like that is, I mean, that's kind of the name of the game in a lot of ways. Like a lot of people, I mean, we all can probably think of situations we've been in where, you know, you either see that with like another musician who's having a really hard time with that, and then if it's a professional situation, they might not be there much longer because they can't survive, because it nobody wants them around if they can't make adjustments and drop their ego out of it. So that's why I think that stuff's so valuable, because it's all of that is wrapped into the same scenarios, in my opinion, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if at its core music is a language, then that doesn't mean anything without other people to speak to, right? Anyone to have conversations with. And it also doesn't mean anything, you know, if without any sort of dissenting opinions, right? You have to kind of have that push and pull to bring new elements and new ideas and correct other people's ideas. And yeah, it can't be so one-sided. It's not a conversation anymore.
Is the version of success you're chasing your own or someone else's? Eric's eyes just got so big.
Oh,
Man, this is therapy, everybody. This is
Eric, you want to take that one first?
What about you, Eric?
You know what? Honestly, though, I would say that my version of success is my own. I do feel like I don't feel pressured, certainly by people close to me, to achieve some, you know, whatever financial goals or career milestone. Like I feel like my career milestones are there because I'm excited to finally cross that threshold, not because of anything else. So yeah, but that's a tough one, because I do understand like the societal pressure of certain things, and especially all the stigmas with being a musician, of course, you know.
Well, maybe I'll ask this way. If money wasn't an issue in any form, would you be doing things differently in your life?
No, you know, I honestly, I really don't think it would. You know, it kind of goes back to that classic question you ask high schoolers with, where it's like, if you had $1 billion, what would you do? And then that's
inflation. In my growing up, it was $1 million.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I had $1 billion. I'd do fuck
for
all.
Inflation. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
But no, I mean, I still would be like, no, the exciting thing is kind of the grind of it. Like, I enjoy the process. It's kind of like why I'm not jumping on Suno writing songs. It's like the fun is the creation. I want that struggle. I want to fight for these achievements. Otherwise, they don't mean anything. It's just like, there it is.
Yeah, it's almost, there's this Tina Fey quote where she's like, her favorite part of writing is when she's done. And I do enjoy the journey. I obviously love drums. My whole life is centered around them. But say I'm doing a song, I'm recording a song for Eve 6, or I'm at the end of my tour, it's the first day off after tour, that's when I feel the most happy. And it's not necessarily while I'm doing it. I mean, that's a bad thing.
No.
But
No, yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody's experience with that kind of stuff is just different. I mean, I can appreciate both of those ideas, like being satisfied with being finished with something, and also just like if we're talking about, like you mentioned something about making, you know, recording drums for somebody or whatever. I do really enjoy the process of that, and just sort of trying to discover something new every time I do it. So yeah, I can see how both things are satisfying in different ways, you know. Being in the moment of creating is kind of, for me, probably the most valuable thing. Like I can't get enough of that. I can't get enough of being in any kind of situation where I have to tap into my own creativity. And it's interesting thinking back to the original question of like, would my version of success be how was it that you asked it? Like,
is the version of success you're chasing your own or someone else's?
Yeah, I would agree with Eric in the sense that mine is definitely my own version. I've certainly had to do things along the way that I didn't originally like have in my vision or anticipate. Just I had to pivot, and I think probably most people would say something like that. Like, there's always going to be moments where you end up pivoting, but my original vision to do the stuff that I'm doing has kind of always remained the same. I just kind of had to come at it from a few different angles that I wasn't necessarily anticipating.
What is that vision, if you could?
I just to be doing, a mix of, just honestly, I'm happy when I'm recording drums for people or playing drums live with people. And those are sort of the two things that when I moved to LA, those are the things that I wanted to do right from the get-go. And I've always done some version of that, and it's moved around. And the one thing that comes to my mind as like a major, it's not even a diversion, but I had to figure out, and this is a bit of an esoteric thing, but I had to figure out how to stay here because I'm Canadian, right? So I needed like work visas and all of that kind of stuff. And the initial work visas I had were through a school, and I taught at the school, and I didn't think that I was going to be doing that for so intensely for so long, but I needed to do that because it was part of like my journey, but I also wanted to do it, right? Just, I didn't think that was going to be heavy in that direction initially, and that's what ended up happening. And now it's like, I don't teach there anymore, and it's sort of like a reverse thing for me in the way my career has turned out. But I just think that, all of that stuff has been a part of the journey, and I'm happy that I did all of it. And I'm ultimately still doing what I set out to do. And, for anybody that's listening to this, for what it's worth, if you're in a situation that you didn't think you were going to be in, it doesn't mean that that's where you're going to be forever. It just means that that's what's happening right now. And you can always change that. You have power to do that. And so for people not to be discouraged by like doing something that they are, being in a situation that is unexpected for them, if that makes sense, Just hang on to your vision, hang on to your ultimate vision of what it is that you want to do, and be open to change. That could change as well, like slightly you could be slightly different from what you originally thought. But I just feel like, it's important not to get discouraged by any sort of slight detours, or if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, like, hold on to the vision, but hold on to it kind of like you'd hold a drumstick, where it's like, don't hold on to it so tight, you got to let it breathe, and you got to be able to every once in a while pause and be like, is this vision, does it still align with who I am as a person? Because I think some people can get, and I don't think you were implying this, I know there's a lot of nuance in what you were saying, and I agree 100% with what you were saying, but I think some people have such stronghold on their vision that they had when they were 20, and now they're 34, and they're like, but I have to do this. It's like, well, does that align with you anymore? So like, have the vision, but also check in with yourself a lot, because yeah, mine's changed a lot. And I would say that with the way that I've formulated my life, which is moving to LA, and now I work with Big Fat Snare Drum, I've had books. I mean, the way that I've cultivated my sources of income and blah 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 is not the general way a lot of people do it. It's just because I've figured out what works with me, what works with my level of energy I can give people in the way that makes sense for me. But originally, maybe it was someone else's dream that I'm chasing. But I think as I've gotten older, drums and that stuff is not as important to me as my mental health. And so, if anything, I take too much self-inventory. Yeah, I think nowadays, I think it is pretty cultivated to what I want to do. So look at us, guys. We're killing it.
Hell yeah. Well, I was just going to say, too, I admire, Ben, I do admire you've come up with some super cool, interesting, creative ways to add to what you're doing just in terms of, a drumming career. And I think a lot of people struggle, and I'm including myself in this, to think outside the box. Like, what else can I be doing here that, like, might add to what I'm doing as a drummer, purely as a drummer, while still kind of, or moving me forward in my life and in my career. That's not the easiest thing to do, to come up with something, and you've come up with multiple things, and I think that is that's important to be open to that kind of stuff, because if it's not like there's a way to do that. Sometimes people do that kind of stuff where you can tell that they're just trying to figure out a way to make extra money. And I'm not saying that that's not what you were also doing, but you also like came up with something or multiple things that are there to like help people in different ways, and it's all related to what you do, and it feels authentic to you. And I think that that's the key with finding stuff like that, is like what's still authentic to me, what still can be considered part of my overall vision. And I find that really inspiring, because I'm not as good at coming up with ideas like that. I'm always thinking about it, but I'm not as good at coming up with ideas as I would imagine that you are. So
Oh, well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you saying that. And then you hear me ask questions and you're like, well, obviously I didn't choose to lean into the things that I'm the best at, but I just chose the things that make me feel happy. God. What is your relationship with creativity in your daily life? And how much of a pedestal do you put that on when it comes to things you release? And I'll leave it as ambiguous as that. I could do what I always do, which is then insert my entire opinion for 10 minutes, but I'll just leave that. What's your relationship with creativity in your daily life?
Oh, man. I don't, to be honest, I don't know that I really think about it.
I love that. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people view it as like a finite resource, where it's like, I only have 2 hours to be creative during the day and then I'm tapped out. I appreciate that perspective, but for some reason it's never clicked with me. I've never felt that way. I don't know that I just kind of like let it happen. It's kind of a weird non-answer, but yeah.
Well, maybe a follow-up to that is, I'll do what I always do, which is I'll answer mine. The reason why I ask it is because I think creativity is such an intimidating entity that I'm always I'm so nervous around it. And so it's this thing that I find is so ephemeral and so intangible, but it's the most important thing, in the world. So it's like my relationship with creativity is a lot different than yours, Eric. I agree. I don't think there's a finite resource of it, but just how to tap into the most efficient way to get there and the most authentic to me creativity. So yeah, I guess that was more the question, just in the thought of creativity as like a noun. What's your relationship with it?
I mean, not to get too deep here, but don't you think that generally speaking, life is just we are all creative beings on some level.
It's all improv.
Even those, right? And even people who aren't in the arts, so to speak, can be really creative. Like I think about my own mom is she was a nurse, and actually a therapist as well. After that, she studied psychotherapy and became a therapist. And I just think
probably a great mom.
Even in those, yeah, I'm lucky, man. And even in those settings, she was extremely creative, and just in her day-to-day life, how she interacted with people, and myself and my brother. There's a lot of creativity there, and I think if you listen to any or have heard any Wayne Shorter quotes or interviews or whatever, he's always talking about how improvisation and creativity and life are so intertwined that, he'll say when people would go to see his band that he was trying to give them an experience that reflected what it was like to live their lives. Like, so you're watching people improvise on stage and make mistakes and struggle, and there's moments of beauty and moments of sadness or anger or whatever it is.
Loneliness, yeah.
He wanted people to experience that. And I think it is something to me that maybe this is somewhat what Eric is saying too. It's like on a day-to-day basis, I definitely don't overthink about that kind of stuff, because obviously there's moments where I'm purely creating, like I'm in my studio working on a track, or I'm rehearsing and playing music with somebody, or playing a gig or whatever. Those are obviously very intensely creative moments, but there's so many other moments in my life where I have to pivot and create and improvise and do all these other things just to get through my day and to live my life as a human. So I really do think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, because you're already creative, we're all already creative, and to just kind of ride that out as much as possible,
Yeah, I think with me too is, and this sounds narcissistic, but it's actually quite the opposite. I'm always nervous to put something out or do something that I think is creative, because in my head, I feel like there's something special about me, and there's something special about everyone, but I'm so afraid to find out that's not the case. And so sometimes I don't even try and tap into as deep as I can, because I'm worried that well will be a more dry than I realize. You know what I mean? So I just avoid it and then just be a paid for hire drummer.
So do you mean when you say that, do you mean you're afraid to put it out because of the feedback that you may or may not get, or are you just thinking in terms of, once I put this out, I don't know if it's good enough to be considered creative even by my own standard? Is that what you mean? Like
Yeah, no, it's a good follow-up. And I guess maybe I worded it poorly, where like I used to write songs for my band in high school. I used to always do that. And nowadays I don't want to sit here in front of a guitar and try and think of melodies, because if I try and for 30 minutes just nothing's coming out, it'll like ruin my night. I'm just like, God, I can't think of anything. Maybe I don't have it. Maybe I'm just fucking generic and I can't, and then you listen to a song that is so inspiring and you're like, God, I'm nothing like that, and like those rabbit holes are so devastating that sometimes I avoid tapping into it to see if there's even anything there. And so I end up doing the same maintenance creativity, where like I do just enough to tell myself, oh, okay, that was a cool fill or whatever. And then I never actually try and go deeper, because I'm worried that I'm just going to be another generic musician. And at the end of the day, what's wrong with that? Like I pay my bills with drums, I get the job done. But for some reason I feel, and that's kind of like that level of success that we're talking about, like for some reason I feel like the better musicians, the more successful people that can sleep better at night, can tap into it and are okay with things not working out all the time. Because it's like, how much of an asshole do I have to be like every time I think something's creative, it actually is creative? No one bats 1,000.
I think there's kind of two sides to this thing, where I kind of have made peace with the idea that sometimes the tide is in and sometimes the tide is out. Where sometimes I'm just like, man, I am bursting at the seams with really cool ideas. And then the next day it's like, I have nothing. Time to work on my taxes.
Don't remind me, dude. That's actually coming up for me.
So it's kind of, yeah, I know. Same. I did that for myself mostly.
I seriously need to do taxes.
But that's a big aspect for me, where there's just sometimes days where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to play the drums today, and I'm not gonna. And I refuse to feel guilty about it. But then there is also the flip side to that coin, where the only way out is through. And it's like the only way to get better about being creative is to be creative, and to force yourself in times when you're not feeling it to just do it anyways, for the practice of doing it. That's a tricky thing, and I don't know. I guess the scales probably tip a certain direction one day versus the next, depending on where I'm at mental health wise. But yeah, I see for sure more where you're coming from with this question now. Yeah.
I don't know. Should creativity be as big of a priority to me as it is? And I think I mentioned it on last week's episode. It's like I was watching this reel of someone saying, just do the work, show up every day, and the creativity will be a byproduct of that. You can't stop it. Or should it be something you actively think about and pursue? And so there's no right answer. It's just I grapple with it all the time.
I had a mentor, earlier on in my life that also suggested, and I'm sure we've all heard like one version of this or another, but the idea that, like, especially for us, because we're drummers and we're involved in music all the time, it's good to take in creative input from other art forms, and that could be going to see a film or going to a museum or something like that, just so you enjoy something that's creative that isn't related to what you do, and see how that refreshes your sense of creativity for what you're doing, and that's worked for me a lot, like just to get inspired by something else. Because I'm sure I'm as guilty as anybody else of like sitting around and watching stuff that everything has to do with what I'm doing. It could be like a YouTube video on recording drums, or it could be just some drum video that I'm watching or whatever, or and a lot of times that gets old, and I'm trying to draw on the same from the same sources all the time. So yeah, it is really good to switch that up, I think, also as a means of stimulating your own creativity.
It's a great approach.
Different people also are inspired by different things. So I'd say, to bookend this part of the conversation, think something outside of the box that has a visceral response to you, and see if you can translate that in the drums. Like, for a generic example, if you can't think of a drum beat, just be like, make a blue drum beat, make an orange drum beat, make a drum beat that makes you think of apples. Like, just like stuff that's like, what the fuck are you talking about? But me saying, think of an apple groove and a blue groove, you played two different things. So obviously it's sparking something, and then just go from there. Just do like what Mark Juliana says. If you don't know what to do, make a drastic choice, and then let that be that new door, and then you can go from there. But yeah, it's it's kind of therapy talking about it. But what's creative to one person is, like a lack of creativity in my head on a groove could be the thing that makes someone so inspired, because it's so creatively not complicated. Right. You're not going to make everyone happy. You're not going to make yourself happy all the time. Just yes and life, I guess.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I never would have come up with the concept, what is a blue groove?
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye!